About asthma with Barnai Roberto. Traditionally referred to as asthma, it is actually an epileptic attack of bronchial muscle or larynx muscles. Epileptic epilepsy of bronchial muscles is manifested by coughing and bronchospasm. Laryngeal asthma by scratching in the throat and passive laryngeal cough. Asthma known in new medicine differs from the traditional asthma phenomenon, because conventional medicine does not distinguish between special biological programs, and thus combines many unmatched elements in a common set. What in the new medical science is called bronchial asthma or ill asthma, is a constellation phenomenon that attacks neurotransmitters. One of its symptoms is loss of consciousness by the patient during the attack. Faintness, lack of contact, and the inability to talk to him, which can be quite frightening for observers. Epilepsy attacks are therefore a variant of asthma, which means that they are bronchial or larynx. But they are not real asthma attacks. Man does not lose consciousness, he does not say from things. We do not lose contact with him. So this is a significantly milder phenomenon. And thank God the most common. Quite often it happens that somebody, even a result of multiple collapse into a conflict, gets involved in a constellation attacking neurotransmitters. Conflicts that cause bronchial asthma attack are in conflicting sexual maturity. Something makes a man dizzy in horror. Someone or something threatens my territory, my property. And that makes me do not know what to do. I have a sense of paralysis. With bronchial asthma in its active period, we observe bronchial muscle relaxation. Of course we did not, because otherwise we could not breathe, and that is not the goal. So we see partial relaxation, whose biological meaning is not to pay attention to too loud breathing. This is because the conflict of territorial fear derives from psychological disturbances that cause a person to feel threatened, fear for themselves and their territory. He reacts with partial relaxation to make it even slower and even quieter. After all, it is a biological reaction that has taken root in nature and in biology over millions of years. When the conflict is resolved, the recovery process of the neurotransmitters responsible for the bronchial muscles begins. 30. What is the midterm recovery period is manifested by the epileptic crisis, which involves muscle contraction and the attack of their trembling and the feeling of jerking. It is often mistaken for asthma. Shrinkage is therefore a physiological phenomenon preceded by the activation of conflict. Without the activation of the conflict, bronchial asthma attacks do not exist. I point out that this is a conflict of fear of loss of territory with the simultaneous sense of paralysis occurring in right-handed mature men. The special bronchial program in left-handed people has a definite schedule of symptoms. I will now describe only the most important of them. Bypassing right-handed people, left-handed women in the fearful conflict also attack the bronchial muscles. Thus left or right-hand sex and hormonal status together determine the order of striking conflicts. I would not like to go into it much now because it's a topic for the whole day of the conversation. And I would have to convey a lot of information necessary to illustrate the situation. The thing is that, and that is most important, there is a predetermined plan that determines who and what conflicts can go through. If you simplify the whole, this is the core. persons who may first suffer from bronchial epilepsy, known under the old name of bronchial asthma, are right-handed men with terrified territorial conflict and left-handed women with a frightening conflict. On the opposite side of the center of the bronchial muscles is the center of the laryngeal muscles. A centimeter above it is the center of speech, which also shows that the control of the larynx is taking place through this side of the brain. Who are the people whose conflicts hit this place? These are first-right women. In mature right-handed men, the conflict strikes the right side of the brain, and in right-handed women to the left. Right-handed women are in the first place a frightening conflict. This conflict resembles the male conflict of terrified territory. At the same time, the territory of a man is large, while the territory of a woman, according to the nature program, is reduced to her own body. Women are then in such a conflict if they themselves, their child, husband, or another person in their nest are in danger. So in right-handed women, the conflict that first emerges is a frightening conflict that can trigger laryngeal asthma attacks. The mechanism is exactly the same as in the case of a change in the bronchial muscles. In the active phase, we see partial relaxation, voice disappears or becomes screeching and squealing. In contrast, during the post-conflict period, during an epileptic crisis, which is a process of reconnection of the larynx, when we see the larynx during an attack trembling under contraction, we are witnessing this kind of reconnecting muscles. If people were aware of this, they would not be so massively attacked by asthma. What's more, they would enjoy the view, but it is a sign of recovery. It is sad that even today few people know about it, and instead it is easily frightened. Through this and again falls into conflict that is runs the vicious circle. Still over and over again producing symptoms. And believes he has asthma. And really only falls into the same conflict. This means that it systematically produces symptoms. So resolving the conflicts described earlier, you can effectively get rid of the symptoms and asthma attacks. This is a great facilitation, especially for those who have struggled for years with a never-active conflict. I will give an example of one of the most common situations, which causes both bronchial asthma and larynx. This is in every case a conflict of terror. So a man something frightened. Or is he afraid of his territory, which in men, as we know, means fear for his own health, existence, workplace, or for anything. When a person goes through such a conflict, unfortunately it happens most often asymptomatically, unnoticed. You do not need to be afraid, of course, but just carefully analyze whether or not something has scared us recently. Suppose one of us has asthma symptoms, which from time to time appear. Let's assume now that a person is watching this video and realizes that the symptoms of asthma are causing her horror. And when they stop worrying, the symptoms of asthma will also disappear. What will happen? Let's suppose you are going through such a conflict right now. You will calm down, resolve the conflict, and then inevitable occurrence of asthma attacks. So there will be another last attack of asthma. After that, if we really got rid of the conflict, no more asthma will happen again. It is good to know the mechanism of these changes, because thanks to this, man can finally understand how they function. And only in this way knowingly affect your changes. Thus the only cure for asthma is a lasting solution to the conflict of terror or territorial conflict. An asthma attack in a child can be very stressful and scary for parents. However, I want to point out that although it is very scary, you must not panic. However, do not underestimate the symptoms. They must not be overlooked. And supervision during the critical period is basically necessary. In such cases, it is good to use the professional help of a physician, a person who knows it and is nearby. He watches over us during a robbery if we talk about a heavy attack. Parents can have a very big impact on the baby. Knows the ways in which a child cannot tell what has happened to him. Understand why the child has a conflict of terror. What a baby really is afraid of. Do we sometimes not have a vicious circle of asthmatic attacks? Perhaps a poor child who has experienced an epileptic seizure once scared him, rejoiced into a conflict and is still repeating it now? In that case, you should look at what caused the conflict in the child. It is important to be aware that asthma attacks occur halfway through the conflict. Then we are no longer dealing with an active conflict. Therefore you should search it much sooner, much earlier. Because in order for an adult or child to produce asthmatic symptoms, they had to solve their conflicts beforehand. Man, knowing this, recognizing the conflict waits, will survive the epilepsy crisis, and thus healed from asthma. However, the actual solution to the conflict is indispensable. There are three types of asthmatic attacks. There is so-called bronchial asthma, laryngeal asthma, and mixed. The latter is very rare. I want to point out that it is a case of 1 in 20,000. Only this asthma attack is life-threatening. During the crisis, the bronchial muscles and larynx muscles simultaneously. If both tissues undergo epileptic crisis, then we can neither inhale nor breathe air. This is the only such situation, so-called acute asthma, which actually requires immediate intervention, during which the most common use of artificial respiration. Let's look at an example of this rarest case. This is the situation when two people in a short time will appear two hammers. Thus epileptic nodules occur in such a person simultaneously on both sides. Who can happen? Firstly, in left-handed people, which is very interesting in their own way. The left-leaning woman, when she suffers from a conflict of terror, because it is left-handed, it hits the right side of the brain, causing male hormone levels to drop, keeping her in a state of femininity and thus being able to fall into another frightful conflict, who will hit the other part of the brain. So a dramatic experience, such as being a witness or participating in an accident, can result in a left-handed woman experiencing two pathological changes. When one of the conflicts of terror is related to the accident itself, and the second conflict of terror will make her see the broken man lying next to her. In this way, two conflicts can occur in principle at one time. But I must say it must bring about a very dramatic, brutal, unexpected and merciless conflict. Thank God very rarely happens. The other two types of seizures were neither bronchial asthma or only laryngeal asthma. They do not present a life threat in themselves. Even then, if the crisis lasts half a day and for half a day the man suffocates from coughing, but then the respiratory function disappears, the lungs do not fill with fluid. As a result, these symptoms do not represent a direct threat to life.